Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm gonna have a little follow-up video this week from last week's video. Last week's video I talked about my history of my career, all the jobs that I've had over the past 10 years. Good God, I'm old. Today I've had the question, what is better to join, a startup or a large-scale company? And that is a very good question, and luckily one that I can have a very informed opinion on. I've been in the industry now 10 years, and I've been at 5 jobs. So I guess I average 2 years per job, not the same amount of time per every job, but that's the average, because math works like that, 10 divided by 2. 4 of those 5 jobs that I've had were at startups. And I've only had one job at a large company, but it's now the company that I'm at now, and I've now been there for 4 years. So evening out my length of experience, I would say that you're coming to a good place for a directly informed opinion on whether, if you're curious about joining a startup or a large company, this is the right video for you. Now, I like starting my videos off with the answer because I think that most YouTube videos just kind of string you along to the end because that's how they get that sweet, sweet revenue. And I want that too, but also I want you to just get the information. So the short answer on should you join a startup or a large company is, I'm sure you can guess, it depends. Each has their strengths, weaknesses, different things that you'll get out of both experiences. So I think that's going to be the better use of our time together, is me kind of relaying my experiences in both those environments and kind of helping you make your own decision. Because at the end of the day, it's your life. I hope that's not copyrighted. So you have to make up your mind if it's now or never. So the first question that I want to talk about is, what do different size companies look for when hiring? This is kind of related to a other video topic. Pretty much, should you be a jack of all trades, master of one, or should you really become an expert in one domain? And that's kind of related to the answer to this question. I'm not going to delve into that too much. I'll save that for another video. But for this video, startups and enterprise, and this is a generalization, this isn't true for every company is different, but by and large, startups are trying to get themselves off the ground, and what they need, by and large, overwhelmingly, are people that have more ability to do multiple things pretty well. They don't necessarily need one person to excel at eking out the most fine-grained performance improvements on a 3G mobile browser. They don't have the time or money to focus in that domain. What they need is somebody to make a website from front to back. Given some requirement where, let's say you're trying to implement forget password flow, what they assume you can do is be able to implement the backend code, like making a forget password token, being able to send out an email, being able to write the HTML for that email, then making the front end that will then handle that link to reset that password. What they want is someone that can do that entire stack, because startups don't have that much money compared to big companies, so they have to be very economical with what they spend it on in terms of developers. So they try to make as much of their money count, and so they want to have somebody that can do just as much as possible. Doesn't have to be as well as possible, but it has to be as much as possible. On the flip side, larger companies have more time and capital to spend. And yes, there's definitely teams at large companies that want that, generalist, that general specialist that has ability to do many things pretty well. But then they can also spend money on very focused tasks at hand. So they could have somebody that's focused on optimizing the mobile experience just for 3G customers, and that's fine. And really, when they're even hiring for those types of roles, they're not going to be one that you get out of college. And that's going to be a skill that you accrue over time. So in some ways, don't even worry about that type of specialized technology, but that's kind of like the split that I've seen at the very least, is that, startups need to have a little bit more general capability, and large companies need to be able to, they want that as well, but they also want to have people that can specialize in certain domains. So that's kind of the company focus on what they want. But in terms of what you will get out of the company, that's also pretty different. But it's also related to what the companies want. So on a startup, because they need to do a lot of things all the time, you are forced to gain exposure to many different things. It may be that you get hired as a front-end engineer, and a year into the job, all of a sudden you have to start delving into AWS's console to spin up an EC2 instance and configure the DNS with Route 53 and just blah. So a lot of words there, but that's an area of knowledge that is very hard to get in a startup. In a large company, because they already have people that specialize in those areas. With a large company, you can have the time, what you're gonna get there is both being able to focus on certain tasks at hand, but that's kind of the technology side of things. What I also want to talk about is the cultures of a startup and a large company, because I think that's honestly one of the most different things of those two types of companies. The technology things is kind of, I think, self-explanatory, but I think it helps to just hear it again. Startups need a lot. Large companies need focus, I guess to say, because they need to just focus. I don't know. But the cultures of startups and big companies, that's where I think the variance is largest. Right now, I'm 10 years into my career, and I'm in a large company, and large companies, by virtue of having been successful, because they've now grown to be big enough, have the luxury of being a little bit more fair to their employees. Which, by that I mean that the work-life balance at larger companies, I would say, is overwhelmingly better than startups. Because there's not as much fear in a large company of dying. A startup is constantly in fear for its own life. It is constantly on life support, constantly trying to raise money to make sure that they have enough cash to pay all the bills. And how that kind of exhibits itself is a environment that needs to find success as fast as possible. Earlier on in my career, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be in that rush, that excitement, that thrill of not exactly knowing if we succeed, but being a part of that process to try to make it so. Startups need a lot from the employees just to survive. The work-life balance isn't always the best, but that's something that you sign up for, I think, when you do join a startup. Likewise, in the same paragraph is the pay that happens with both these companies. I'm not going to get into specific numbers, but big companies can definitely focus on just base compensation and then equity on top. The startup mind is not as high base because, of course, they are always strapped for cash, but then more equity on top of that. It's very much entering the lottery. If you believe in the company, then it's a thing that you should do, but be aware that this equity could potentially work out to be worth a lot of money, but it also could be worth nothing. I like to call it quantum money because it simultaneously is worth a lot and nothing, depending upon which way the wind blows and if the company succeeds or not. So you take a smaller base paycheck through the years of the startup, and if it hits big, then all of a sudden all this equity can then be cashed in, and you get that nice cushy pad. Whereas large companies, you're kind of coming in at a higher base and equity on top, but it's more predictable in what you'll be taking home every month. So a little bit more predictable in that aspect. And let's say you're just coming right out of college and you're trying to figure out if you should join a big company or a startup or a big company. And really what the question that I pose back to you is, what do you want to do at the beginning of your career? Do you not really know what you want to focus on? If you're kind of confused with what your curiosity is, then I would say maybe go to a startup, because a startup will have the most amount of ability for you to get exposure to many things without any worry about somebody already doing that job and not letting you try it out. Like in a startup, you, by and large, have the opportunity to try as much as you want and just see what you enjoy doing. If you already know what you're interested in, like if you're interested in doing some Erlang coding with highly parallelized message passing, then find a larger established company that already does that. And they will be the best mentors in that pursuit that you could find anywhere else, because they already have experience there and they'll happily ramp you up to that capacity as well. So, which isn't to say that you can't get the same experience in a large company that you can in a startup. I just think it's harder, frankly. My career is 4 startups and a large company. It was fine. It was good. I enjoyed it. There were a few things that finally pushed me from seeking out startups to big companies. One of which was just I wanted more stability in a company. I have a family now with dependents that need to depend on me for an income. So I didn't enjoy having the risk was fun when I was not married and I could just not worry about it. But now that I need to have people have steady reliability, a larger company is very much what's there. And also mentorship got a little bit hard for me in the startup world. I had been in the startup world for 6 years, and in many ways, I think I soaked up as much as I could find in those 6 years of a startup. And I learned a lot. I grew my career a lot. I wouldn't be where I am today without those startups. But after 6 years, I started to run out of people to learn from, because a lot of them had then made that journey themselves to larger companies. And that's where I am now soaking up as much knowledge as I can from people that are more experienced and smarter than me in a larger company. So that's one thing you could consider, to go after that thrill, that rush to find that knowledge in startup land and then make that decision to enterprise or large companies. You always go back and forth. There's no real track that you're required to stay in. There is flexibility between both of them. Hopefully that kind of helps you decide what type of company you're looking for. I mean, there's companies of all different sizes. There's small, medium, large, and huge. I guess that's called enterprise. And each of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. I'm a big believer in variety being the spice of life. So taking time earlier in your career, kind of try out as much as you can to learn what you like most, is probably the best choice for you. So I'll be curious to see if your experiences lined up with me. I personally think most of this is self-evident, but I've also been in the industry for 10 years. So it's like a thing that's saying oh, I'm a marathon runner and I know that the 14th mile in a marathon is the hardest, but I'm not a marathon runner. But sometimes you just take things for granted and you have to kind of just remember that you have assumptions that are built in that you have to just kind of break down. So hopefully that was helpful to you. I'm curious if you have any questions about the things I said. Happily answer them in the comments. You know me. I'm always there in those comments. I'm there with you in the trenches, so let me know what you think, and I will catch you again in a new video next week. Stay coding, stay happy. Bye.